Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
Well, how do we increase force, right? Well, one is you increase muscle strength. I think a lot of people understand that, right? If you want to be strong, if you're stronger, you can put more force into the bar, into the floor, off the table, you can block, right? Or if you're stronger, you won't lose energy when your shoulders collapse. You're less resistant to buckling, right? Or blocking, kind of caving in on you. So two is that you can increase the coordination of muscles working together. And that's a lot of what strength and conditioning does, is sometimes it does truly make you stronger, but it also sometimes helps different groups of muscles work together at the same time. So when you do a good squat loading pattern, or you do some power work, right, you can help teach the motor units, the basic units of your quads, right, the muscles, to work together and fire at the same time. And when they all fire together, if they're bigger areas of the muscles work together at a faster rate, they're obviously going to put more power out. So hopefully that makes sense. And three, which is what everybody in this Zoom is probably experts at, is just having really good gymnastics technique, right? If you are really, really strong, but you have terrible technique, it's going to be challenging to optimize your power output, right? Vice versa. If you're strong and you have really, really good technique, you're not going to lose energy, right? We all know the classic example of, think about like the younger club gymnast who's like, 10 to 12, and they're still not quite getting the technique yet. They could run as hard as they want, but if they hit the ground with a loose core and a relaxed body shape, it's like a noodle, right? And they go nowhere because their power is not really going anywhere. It's lost, right, when they're not tight. So we need both. We need really good strength. We need coordination of these muscles together, but then we need really, really good gymnastics technique. And that's where the hybrid model starts to get its buds, is from the traditional side of strength and conditioning, but then also the great gymnastics coaching side as well. So in college gymnasts in particularly, most people are getting a lot filled in that bucket before they come to college, right? They've had a lot of technique, they've learned skills, they understand stuff. You can, of course, make athletes have a better handstand and better technique. I'm not saying you can't, but that bucket has got a lot of stuff put into it pretty much, right? If you look at the science on what is the best way to make kids stronger for 1 and 2, it's weight training, right? Like obviously body weight training is important, core work and body weight jumping and squats and plyos. I use that. It's super important. But if you look at the traditional strength conditioning research, doing properly, dosed weight training and overload is going to unlock massive amounts of strength for the athlete, right? And it's also going to be one of the best things we can do to make those muscles work together. Because when you're squatting with load, if it's slightly heavier than you maybe are comfortable with and you haven't done before, your body finds a way to get more into that, which is usually recruiting more motor units, they're called, or unlocking some of the bigger, fast twitch motor units, which you're going to probably need to get power down the road. So hopefully it's this not too much geeky science. I'm trying to sum it up pretty well. If it's confusing, please put it in the chat and I'll clarify questions. But that is the basis in a nutshell of how maybe we can increase force. Right. So the performance aspect of this is just think in your head on your team about athletes who you've tried all the things. You've tried to do drills and skills and everything you possibly could, but no matter how many drills you do or the best things you set up for programming or rest days or work, they just can't seem to make progress in their power. They seem to always fall apart in terms of, making new skills come about or getting through their old skills successfully. They gas out in routines. They don't have a lot of end of steam routine cardio to get through like a dismount or their last tumbling pass. And obviously that starts to shake around the injury risk, right? Landing those last passes short or end of the year, starting to get tired, right? Or it's just straight up, they can't move up in level. And level here means level of collegiate level, right? So like they can't go from that just kind of getting in the scene of freshman year to really excelling and being someone who's a reliable person on your lineup, and then someone who's a staple, junior, senior year, and you can count on for everything you need. In your mind, you think about those things and you think about what's a common denominator between why all those problems exist. And again, it's a lack of this science-based, evidence-based weight training and hybrid model. Because if you have someone who does go through a proper strength training program, that allows them the opportunity to have more strength, as we just talked about, which then gives them the opportunity to work on that and translate that into power and speed. But also strength at a baseline level is a foundation of really good anaerobic cardio, which is that 90-second burst floor routine. Get through it, right? Someone who has a really, really low strength profile and a low training age is not going to always do the best with cardio because they're going to fall apart. They're not going to have muscular endurance. So strength training is a foundational pedestal to then develop that explosive power, that explosive speed, and also the cardio you would need to be successful in, vault, expressing that over 10 seconds or floor, doing that over 90 seconds. But also someone who's better conditioned and has a higher training load can also recover from routines faster and get through a full meet, or get through practices and do more load in a 3-hour block. All right. And what that sets us up for next is obviously the ability to train and compete harder skills. If you're stronger and more powerful and you have better cardio, you can do harder D-level passes, right? You can do more blocking height for a 1.5, or go from a layout to a half, or a tuck to a pike, whatever the situation may be. But also you're going to have better overall gas in the tank for practices, right? You're going to be able to do more training load inside of a practice, which is really something that is also important to realize, is that yes, it's important to pull back and to modify and to plan. And then lastly here, right, that will give you increased ability to do more skills, move up in that level. Like I said, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and they can compete really well because they're really conditioned, they're really fit. So I think the best way to do this is to go through some examples of how certain skills that I know people want will show up. We're going to go event by event and just look at stuff. Again, Kylie here, she's the star of the show. She's given me permission to use all her videos and all her release forms, stuff like that. So I will play it once through in regular, and then I will go through hand because I know it'll be glitchy. So she's a phenomenal vaulter. So here we see Yurchenko full, and I will slow this down myself so you can see. Just look at the pieces. So I have a basic run. We're going to make this show up in exercise selection and hopefully try to illustrate the point of how what exercises we choose are going to show up in terms of sprinting speed or blocking angle or whatever else it is. Okay, so when you look at that and you break things down in freeze frames, some of the Kodak moments I think that are good to look at is this is what you see in running and in this hurdle. You can see how the sprinting kind of one leg, it's called the split pelvis position, that is really going to show up in things like split squats or single leg hip thrust, single leg weight, or wall sprinting drills, right? Developing the general capacity to get strong in those positions and then do drills like sprint work that teaches you the key fundamental elements of running posture, how to run correctly, how to use that strength fast. That is how you get someone faster. And that's one of the biggest things that we see with a little bit of strength training and a little bit of technique on how to sprint well, not point your toes, keep your shins up, where should your arms go? And then we get athletes stronger is their ability to get down the runway faster. Those first 3 steps of their floor tumbling pass are just through the roof. And we see what's called a 10-meter dash time go up. We can see with timing gates over the course of 3 months in the summer, they truly get faster by just doing a little bit of strength work and a little bit of sprint technique work. Versus hitting the table here shows up in some overhead position work here. So this is a landmine press you can't see, but she's doing some landmine press, trying to developing the strength of her shoulder to handle that impact over here. And then obviously the most clear one that I've talked about with the landing stuff is proper hinging and proper squatting loading will give you a better capacity to handle forces, right? To handle high landing forces. You guys might have remembered the stat that these landing forces are anywhere between 15 to 18 times body weight. The largest force that we've seen during back tumbling of the ankle is 23 times body weight down here at this joint. So being able to be strong and then slowly condition somebody to do plyos towards the end of the August summer helps them smoothly get back to everyone on this call and have a nice slow on ramp versus, not doing this. And maybe it's a shock to their system when they go back and start doing things. How do we prevent this, right? So one is you have to have a phenomenal sports nutrition and strength conditioning team on board to help advise some of these things. Shout out to all those people who do it. You're amazing. Okay. Generally, what I recommend is we're going to lift maximally 2 days per week in the off season, right? So along with maybe 3 to 5 days of the actual gymnastic stuff, we're going to probably be doing only 2 days in the weight room of a compound approach, right? We're not going to be doing hypertrophy based work. We're probably going for max strength, which is probably 3 to 5 sets of 6 to 10, depending on the research you read, with a moderate weight, but a high intensity focus. So a lot of effort put in, a lot of compound multi-joint movements. We'll always be doing some gymnastic stuff every single day. And we're never going to be we might do some accessory work for like the hip or the rotator cuff, but we're definitely not going to have somebody go over and do 5 sets of super heavy knee extensions to failure, right? That's not going to be what we're going for. We're going to follow this funnel of build a strength base in the summer, get general power, and then try to get that into the actual gymnastics routine stuff. All right. So just maybe shooting myself in the foot. My traditional old school mindset of developing like leg circuits, for example, which is what you see a lot at the club level, was very classically wrong for this kind of stuff, right? So like 45 seconds of squat jumps, then go over and run for 45 seconds, do a bunch of panel mat plyos, and then do some more resi jumps, right? Or like bar conditioning would be like tons of rope climbs, tons of leg lifts, tons of pull-ups, tons of chin-up levers, tons of band pull-downs. Nothing wrong with that in the right dose. But in my head, I'm literally working what I think is right. And it's doing the exact same muscle group over and over and over for really high reps with really low body weight load. And what it gets is really high fatigue and really high metabolic load close to failure honestly, and I've talked to some strength coaches about this, I was probably building sets and reps that were building the hypertrophy I didn't want because I didn't understand the science of this kind of stuff versus doing what we'll talk about, which is this hybrid model. Doing 20 minutes of squat jumps and running and mat plyos is like quad, 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 right? And you see a lot of athletes who develop very, very, strong quads, which is awesome, but they're not balanced. They don't have good balance of their quads to hamstrings and glutes. And it starts to get into a problem with sprinting power or running power or landing power. But it also gets into a huge problem with injury risk because we overload their anterior chain or their quads. So I was probably doing exactly what I thought I didn't want to do by doing traditional old school methods. There's a time and place for it. Don't get me wrong, but it has to be in the right dosage and in the right time. Ward says, where would you place your weight training during the week in order to get the most out of the weight training without sacrificing the effectiveness of technical gymnastics practice due to soreness and fatigue? Great question. Again, off season, it's the priority or it's more important. So I would say that's probably going to go in the beginning of the week when they need effort to that. So I might do like a Monday, Thursday split for that or a Tuesday, Thursday split because I want them to be fresh. I want them to have the ability to do hard training in a smart way. If you put those training blocks, like I've seen some programs just like scramble together and it's like Thursday, Friday, or Wednesday, Friday, and you're like, like it's really almost, it starts to become not effective to get you inside of the workout training block. You're like going there and there's like, squats. I can't, it's just the bike is like, like, what are we doing? It just starts to become not as effective. And every strength coach here in the chat will know how tough it is to get an athlete or an athlete group who is on 25% energy and they have to do bike repeats or squats. It's pretty brutal. So yeah, in the off season, I would say front load it in the beginning of the week, whereas maybe preseason it's in the middle. And then, later a little bit, you're going to be probably, and then in season, it's just kind of wherever you can fit it. Here's some examples. Kylie's program from the off season is there for you guys to check out. We put in the entire thing for you. There's some templates and stuff, but Kylie gave me permission to share what her summer program looked like. So this would be her in the weight room with us. So she would do this entire warm up, soft tissue prep, some power work in the beginning here, med ball slams, vertical jumps. We'll talk about that next week. And then this is her main training block. This was her first day training block: goblet squats, some core work, hip lifts, elevated yoga push-ups for some range of motion stuff, some lateral lunges, one-arm dumbbell rows, and then some cuff work because she had some shoulder stuff going on. Her circuit in the gym was just some interval work of bike sprints and med ball slams. Okay, so just an example. Again, we'll break this down pretty in depth next week. But here's another example for her actual gymnastic stuff when she worked. So this was from her, she's an adult, right? She makes her own gymnastics program and her coach is the one who's helping her out a ton. But you guys all probably know in college, college gymnasts go home and do the majority of what they need and their coaches give them input. It's not like club where I'm like 5 of these, 5 of these, 5 of these. So she was asking me, what I can work on inside and what, the coach can help build her program with. So this was her, this was her warm up and stuff over here with like core work and stalder work and leg lifts and what my buddy Nick calls the daily dozen. So he has categories of like handstand, rope climb, core work, all that. So the daily dozen is just like what I think is the bare minimum standard. And then handstand work, just some drills, stuff like that on lines on the floor. And then this was her gymnastics specific conditioning for whatever day this was. So some deer jumps, rope climbs, side plank work, roll to candlestick jumps, cast handstands, arch hollow work, some split sliders for eccentrics on that, some shoulder work, and then some compression work as well. So again, she didn't do exactly this. I was giving her advice on what she thought would do well. And obviously she can adjust as she needs. And then this would be an example of an out of season cardio circuit. Ignore all the stuff on the right. That's just really, really geeky stuff that I put in to remember. But 30-second med ball slam, 30-second jumping lunges, and a 30-second handstand walk, 30 seconds of speed V-ups. It's 2 minutes. We're doing this maybe later. So, and then, she'd have either she's on a clock by herself, whatever, how long it takes you to do that, rest 3 times as much because the interval system, you want to make sure you're recovering, or honestly, it should be even more than that, like up to like 7 and 8, but discussion for a different time. But yeah, or she has friends that she works out with too, obviously, so they do it together. But these are horrible. They're one of the hardest things ever, but they're very, very effective to build up some conditioning off season.